Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a bitch off the field right now, out, he's fired. He's fired! You were here long before any of us were here. Although we have a representative in Congress who they say was here a long time ago. They call her Pocahontas. But you know what? I like you.
It's really startling stuff. With us now, the founder and president of Liberty Government Affairs, Brian Darling, executive director of the NAACP Mississippi State Conference, Corey Wiggins, MSNBC political contributor and New York Times columnist Bret Stephens, and Democratic strategist Liz Smith. Thank you all for being here. Let's start with you, Corey. Your thoughts on the decision to have President Trump speak at the museum opening today, despite so much protest about it?
You know, when we think about this opportunity to shine light on those people here in Mississippi who are involved in the civil rights movement, those who gave their lives in the civil rights movement, his visit today has been a distraction from those people who gave so much. And additionally, when you think about and you listen to and know the policies that's been championed by this president, they don't align with those values that so many folks fought for, so many folks struggled for in the terms of the public policy that's being presented by the current administration.
And those people who gave so much who weren't able to enjoy today's event. Do you support Congressman Lewis and Thompson's decision to skip today's ceremony, or would it have been important for them to attend and make a statement against Trump?
Well, I think that there's been plenty of opportunity for the president to have a substantive conversation with congressmen, with communities, with the African-American community, and we just hadn't seen that. And so I respect the decision for both congressmen not to attend. And actually, I participated in a press conference this morning that was really designed to shine light on those individuals who were in the movement, who struggled for civil rights. And let's keep the focus and the conversation on them and not about the president and his visit.
Right, and not necessarily getting that photo up. So last night, the president was in the Florida Panhandle near Alabama. He encouraged the people of Alabama to vote for Roy Moore on Tuesday, doubling down on this. Now, the allegations of sexual misconduct against Roy Moore have been making headlines for weeks, but here's what else he said back in September.
What does Trump mean? What does people mean to make it great again?
I think it was great at the time when families were united. Even though we had slavery, they cared for one another. People were strong in the families. Our families were strong. Our country had a direction, and we corrected many of the problems.
Brian, what can we learn from this statement? How can the president support a candidate who gave that explanation to his Make America Great Again motto?
Well, my understanding is that comment was taken out of context, and he was not saying anything in favor of slavery. And this is typical of the left, to accuse all Republicans of being racist and insensitive. And a lot of this comes down to 2018 politics. Why is Donald Trump supporting Roy Moore? It's because he wants to not give away a seat to Democrats and go down to 51-49 in the Senate right now. He's worried about next fall. Next fall is going to be very difficult for Republicans to retain the House and the Senate with the current climate. So giving away that seat now would make it a lot easier for Democrats to take over the Senate, meaning he's not going to be able to continue his fight to repeal Obamacare, cut taxes, and cut the government down to size.
So is that the message Donald Trump is saying, that political gains are the only thing that matters, getting that tax cut passed?
No, I mean, I think it is obviously, if you're down in Alabama, you have a tough decision to make. But ultimately, if I was in Alabama, I'd vote for Roy Moore, because I would want to see my taxes cut. I would want to see Obamacare repealed. I want to see the government shrunk. I want to see more conservative justices on the Supreme Court. And so that overrides any misgivings I have about Roy Moore's personal failings.
And you're not the only one. Liz, Roy Moore is leading in a lot of polls. What does this say about Democrats in Alabama, that they cannot go up against someone like Roy Moore, who is so divisive in his rhetoric?
Well, first of all, the fact that we're even talking about the Alabama Senate race is insane. I mean, this is a state that Donald Trump won by almost 30 points. And even though Roy Moore is controversial, this is a deep, deep red state. But I think the bigger issue here is what it means for the Republican Party, not for the Democratic Party. Because they might win the battle here, they might win this race, but I think they're going to lose the war by selling out their souls to back someone like Roy Moore. And it's not just, the allegations that he was preying on 14-year-old girls. This is a guy who goes out and says that, Muslims can't serve in government because of their faith. He goes out and says horrifically anti-LGBT comments. And that is part of a larger issue for the Republican Party, that they are painting themselves into a corner as these, social extremists, and it's causing suburban and younger voters to leave the party in droves.
So essentially they're winning the battle and not this larger war.
I agree with Liz. Look, I'm speaking as someone who voted for the Republican ticket in every election until last year, and I'm someone who opposed Obamacare, wants taxes lower, was happy to see Neil Gorsuch on the Supreme Court, but to use biblical terms that people like your previous speaker might appreciate, this is selling your birthright, the Republican Party's birthright, for a mess of pottage. This is selling the birthright of Abraham Lincoln, Dwight Eisenhower, Barry Goldwater, Ronald Reagan, for the sake of a single seat in the Senate. What message does this send to every woman? What message does this send permanently about the Republican Party to every African American that the party might seek in the future to attract? That the President of the United States is endorsing a birther, that the President of the United States is endorsing a Christianist who seems to think that I, as a Jew, have no ticket to heaven, that the President of the United States is endorsing a man about whom there are credible allegations, almost incontrovertible allegations of pedophilia. It's sickening to see the utter moral degeneration of the Republican Party. And one of the most interesting ironies, I think, of the last few years is it is now the Democratic Party that is clearly the party of family values, better family values, I might add, because they include gays and lesbians than the old Republican family values. This is a Republican Party that's standing up for women, for gentlemanliness, or excuse me, a Democratic Party that's standing up for women, gentlemanliness, decency in our public discourse, while the Republicans repudiate all those things. Why? For a single seat in the Senate going ahead of 2018. I worked on the editorial board of the Wall Street.
You voted for Hillary Clinton.
Yes, I did. I voted for Hillary.
Boss, Rand Paul, because he's a conservative, and you hate the Freedom Caucus in the House.
As a conservative, you put country over party. You put your country over this kind of narrow partisanship, and there are things that are ultimately more important than how health care is delivered or what my tax rates are, which are probably going to be pretty high. That's fine by me, so long as the Republican Party isn't known as the party that endorses pedophiles for a single seat on the Senate.
Is this political suicide for the Republican Party?
Yeah, look, I don't know that it's political suicide, but I think it is going to be very harmful to them in the long term. The election of Trump and adding Roy Moore is going to hurt them. And you can rest assured that Roy Moore will pop up in Democratic ads across the country. And so, look, you might get your tax cut, but it could cost them seats over the next 2-4 years.
Brian, how do you reconcile this? How do you respond?
Democrats are loaded with people with the same problems. Al Franken, Bill Clinton, Harvey Weinstein, who funded the Democratic Party. I don't think anybody's going to say that because the Republicans allowed Roy Moore to be seated in the Senate, they're not going to vote for a Republican in Wisconsin or Minnesota or any of these other states. But I think it's laughable to listen to a guy like Bret Stephens, who hates conservatives. He's barely a Republican. Nobody should listen to people like that, because the American people support Donald Trump. I mean, he won the election fair and square. They love these policies that are reinvigorating our economy. And this Roy Moore controversy is something that's very important, but it doesn't tarnish the party. The party's a lot bigger than Roy Moore.
But you bring up an important point, the resignation of Al Franken.
I hate conservatives because I don't want the Republican Party associated with a pedophile is one of the more astonishing comments, I believe, on television today. What happened to a conservative conservative movement that has no sense of principle other than getting a guy like Donald Trump, who wasn't even a Republican until a few years ago, elected president to pass an agenda that most conservatives would say is only dubiously conservative and opportunistically opportunistically so. And I have supported the president when I agree with him, as I did today, on his decision on moving the embassy to Jerusalem. But that doesn't mean that I just unthinkingly and unflinchingly defend the president no matter what it is that he does. Can you not ask yourself, what are you saying to your daughters that this party is endorsing a candidate who preys on 14-year-old girls? That's an astonishing comment to me. You think this is a small thing?
Is that you want to give the Senate and House away to Democrats.
This is the same party that
Hillary Clinton to be president of the United
went nuts when Bill Clinton had an affair with a 21 or 22-year-old woman.
And
you impeach the president for that.
We point out the stark contrast here between Al Franken necessarily getting thrown under the bus by the Democratic Party. We're conflating all of these issues, which are very, very different.
Yeah, but Bill Clinton wasn't thrown under the bus by his own party.
You're talking. Let's talk about what's happening right now. We kicked Al Franken to the curb. We kicked John Conyers to the curb, and we sent a strong signal that we will not accept sexual misconduct, whether it's groping, sexual harassment, using your position of power. And we sure as heck would never, ever put our party brand behind someone that preys on 14-year-old girls. And you know what? I'm going to defend Brett here and just say that he may break with the Republican Party sometimes, but you don't have to just be a Republican to be able to speak out on these issues. You don't have to be a hardline conservative always to speak out on these issues. And the Republican Party would be very smart to listen to people like Brett.
Yeah, they would have voted for Hillary Clinton.
Is Roy Moore going to be wandering the halls of the Senate with no one speaking to him? I mean, is he really going to change things for the Republican Party because no one's going to want to work with him?
Well, what's going to happen to the Republican Party is that the Republican brand is going to be permanently tarnished for a younger generation, where it is going to be the party of pedophiles and their enablers and endorsers. And so I would say to Mr. Darling, if you're interested in a healthy Republican future, repudiate this kind of thing. Otherwise, you have no standards. You are a parody of everything conservatives have been saying about liberals since 1968.
All right. Very interesting discussion we're having here. Thank you all for joining us. We do have Brian Darling and Brett Seiss. Liz, thank you for joining us.